My name is Charles Kalima. I'm the head of department for commercial and technical studies at Amilak Training Center. We've only got one campus here in Rhodoport in Johannesburg. And so it's a privilege for me to share with you to help you guys to become MCIPS, all right? Like Saria said, we've got various methods that we use to support our students. We've got very well experienced lecturers. I myself have got a lot of years of experience in procurement in the private sector and public sector, and I've got my engineering background, of course, procurement and the legal background as well. So yeah, and I've also been a lecturer, a guest lecturer at Wits University, and external examiner for University of Pretoria, and also Rhodes University in the Eastern Cape, those of you who live in South Africa. So that's briefly about me, and I'm here to help you with the journey to get to your MCIPS. So I'm sure we will help get there no makanjani. All right. Okay, so let's get started. It's commercial negotiations that what we're going to be talking about. Commercial negotiations is the subject we're going to be talking about. And remember, it is specifically says commercial negotiations because there are various negotiations that you will come across, although some principles will be the same, which we'll talk about. Those of you who who've got children, you probably have been involved in lobola negotiations. So this is not what we're talking about. You've probably been involved in negotiations with one country and another about peace treaties and things like that. That is not the focus of our conversation tonight. Tonight, we are talking about commercial negotiations that have to do with the whole procurement and supply chain environment. Okay, so let's get started with that. Firstly, let me just say here, I'll minimize that. Okay, cool. The learning outcomes for learning outcome 1 are the following. Okay, so we start with 1.1, where we're going to analyze the application of these commercial negotiations in the work of procurement and supply. And then we'll talk about we'll differentiate the types of approaches that can be pursued in commercial negotiations, explain how the balance of power in commercial negotiations can affect outcomes, identify the different types of relationships that impact on commercial negotiations. Now, what I'll do is, as we go along, like Saria said, put your questions in the Q&A. I like it when you do that. When I see that the questions are building up there, I'll go there and address your question as we go along. Alternatively, if you must talk, then I'd like you to raise your hand. I'll see your hand and then I'll give you a chance to talk. But at the end of each of these, we are going to go through a couple of questions and answers that we can deal with, some of which will come from what you have asked. And I hope you enjoyed the questions I put on the chat. There was some very interesting responses that got from you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for that very robust engagement. And just to say to you that over the years, we've been dealing with CIPS, and we've built up a whole portfolio of questions that we put on our learning management system, where our students are able to attempt these mock type questions on their own. It times them and they attempt those questions. Anyway, so let's go to the next slide. So we'll start with the application of these commercial negotiations within the work of procurement and supply chain. And you see, it is always good to start with a couple of definitions to help you understand what we are talking about. Definitions and why do we negotiate? Okay, this is a very important basis that we are setting. Negotiation is a process where two or more parties with shared or divergent interests are discussing with the aim of reaching an agreement or settlement of an issue. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember this. Negotiation happens between multi-party individuals, and those individuals must have divergent interests, okay? Or they might have shared interests as well, all right? So the concept of divergency normally in a supplier and buyer relationship is what is the case in most instances. Okay, so you'll find that the interests that you have are not exactly the same. One wants to get your money, the other one wants to get products. They are not exactly what everybody is pushing for. And so divergent views, and I'm elaborating that because for every divergent views, there are opposing opinions, and where opposing opinions exist, there is potential for a conflict to arise. And that is why you find that in negotiations, in commercial negotiations, it is very important for a buyer or a negotiator to understand how to resolve conflicts, okay? So a buyer may need to negotiate for the following reasons. You may need to negotiate what objectives you will set and given priority in making plans and managing projects, all right? You may need to negotiate this. And you can already see that as we start to define commercial negotiations and the reason why buyers negotiate, you see that negotiation of objectives to be set, it becomes an internal conversation within the organization. Already, we are preempting the fact that negotiations begin within the company where you work. What objectives are you going to set? And different people might have different objectives. In this case, when you're talking about internal or negotiations internal to the buying organization, you are talking about shared interests. You've got shared interests with your colleagues. All you want is a product from the supplier. You want it on the right time, in the right place, right quality, right quantity, and right price. So you have shared views and you need to negotiate that. Mutual acceptable terms and conditions of work and working together. Now we are going beyond our organization and we want to negotiate how we can work together mutually with acceptable terms and conditions, okay? Approaches to resolving conflicts and problems that may arise in the course of work. Now, this has taken you beyond the contract award. So, ladies and gentlemen, here are the 3 buckets of areas that you negotiate under. Number 1, internally with your colleagues, all right? Number 2, with the supplier, in order for you to contract and work with the supplier together. And number 3, the 3rd bucket is to resolve conflicts and problems that may arise after contract. Now, negotiations may not always be required. There are certain instances where you do not need to negotiate. Okay, now I put in a couple of points here. I don't know how many of you have worked with the World Bank, or if you have come across World Bank rules. You will notice that World Bank rules are very specific about negotiations. They said negotiate only with the lowest bidder for scope reduction or risk reallocation, because the World Bank procurement rules are fairly different, and you have to understand when you are handling a World Bank type of project. Okay, and here there is a lot of requirement for pre-qualification. Suppliers have to meet specific qualification criteria, and once they meet that quality gate of supplier or technical specifications, then beyond that, when they submit the bids, you do not negotiate with them for over anything like you do in normal, as like in South Africa. There are certain times we have to call maybe 1 or 2 or 3, 2, 3 or 4 suppliers. You negotiate with them one after the other, and whoever gives you the best offering at the end is the one you contract with. But in this case, only negotiate with lowest supplier. Okay, so understand that there could be some restrictions with regards to your organization. So the key here, ladies and gentlemen, is for you to understand your organization's internal policies and procedures. And if you're using borrowed money, understand what the funder's requirements are with regards to negotiating with bidding suppliers. Okay? Negotiation, another reason why negotiation may not always be required is that it is not free, okay? It costs money. A buyer must conduct a cost-benefit analysis of the negotiation. If you find that it is more expensive to negotiate rather than just directly contract, then you may just go into direct contracting without negotiation with the supplier. So you do all the internal work within, so that the only thing that remains to evaluate is your pricing, and there's no need for you to negotiate. You already ask suppliers to accept your terms and conditions in advance, and then the only thing that you pick is the cheapest supplier that you go with. All right. So those are some of the instances where you may not need to negotiate. Okay. If you have any questions, please post them on the Q&A. Okay, I'll come to them as we go along. Let's look at a couple of definitions as well as we set up. Now, negotiation, we said earlier that it is where two or three people with either similar or shared or divergent views come together to reach an agreement. Now, okay, so in technical definition of procurement definition of negotiation, it does not necessarily mean the following. When you talk about persuasion, when you are persuading somebody, you are not negotiating with them. You need to distinguish this. These are methods that we can bring in when we are negotiating with suppliers, but when they stand alone on themselves, they are not negotiating. So if somebody is coming to persuade you about something, they appeal to your needs, goals, and interests and your interests, they are really not negotiating with you. They're trying to persuade you. Command decisions, like in the army, where the army general gives orders to his subordinates, instructing them to do certain things, that is not negotiation. Instructing litigation. Now, litigation is the process of taking legal action to force another party to comply to a certain demand. Now, that also is not negotiation. Coercion as well, the use of force, is not negotiation. So you need to understand the distinction here, ladies and gentlemen, and especially that this is a multiple choice type of exam that you will be undertaking. You should be clear in your mind when a certain terminology is used, that it cannot be regarded as commercial negotiations, okay? Let's look at the concept of content versus process. Now, the content of the negotiation is different, and it is helpful if the negotiator is familiar with the subject matter. Now, the content basically is what you are negotiating about. Some of you are in the service industries, others are in the technical industry, others in the construction industry. So when you are negotiating the procurement, or you are in the mining industry, you are negotiating the procurement of yellow plant for the mining. Now, the mining sector will understand what yellow plant is. It's all equipment. It's duped yellow plant because most of the graders, caterpillars, and earth-moving equipment were painted yellow. So we always refer to them as yellow plant. So when you are negotiating the acquisition of yellow plant, the content that you are talking about of the negotiation is yellow plant. You are negotiating. That is the subject matter you are talking about. If you are negotiating for a services or a security contract, the content is security. Now, what we are saying here is that it is okay for you as a buyer or a procurement professional to know the subject matter intricately, but if you don't, it's not a train smash. Because we do not hold you accountable for the content. We hold you accountable for the process, okay? The process of negotiation is the same. It is how the negotiation is managed, okay, how it is conducted. And the custodian of that is you, the procurement practitioner. Now, if you're like me, when I was procuring technical equipment and having an engineering background, I could play both roles. I know the content, I am accountable for the process, but the engineer is not going to pull wool over my face, because I know what yellow plant looks like. I know what mechanical parts look like. I know things. I can interpret the technical drawing and so on. All I'm saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, that if you have to do research for you to have an understanding of the content of what you're going to be negotiating, which is a subject matter, you will do well. But the organization will hold you accountable for the process to ensure that the process that you follow in negotiation is the right process. And this is what we are talking about today. Okay. So negotiation in relation to the stages of the sourcing process. At every stage in the whole process of procuring goods and services, there are negotiations that take place. From the creation of specifications, from identification of need and creation of specification, right to sourcing the market and so on. They are specific levels of negotiations that you have to do in procurement. And remember, always keep this in mind. Commercial negotiation is where two or more parties with similar or divergent interests meet in order for them to reach a contract or an agreement. All right. So you will always have two opposing parties. When you identify a need, in fact, they don't have to always oppose. They could be parties with the same interest. When you identify a need, the buyer must be there, early buyer involvement, and the end user. The end user has got their own requirements, and the buyer has got their own requirements. So there has to be negotiation that takes place all the time during the stages of the sourcing process, okay? However, they can only be employed at multiple stages throughout the contract life cycle. Yeah, they can also, in the contract life cycle, you can also employ negotiation processes through the contract life cycle, okay? Now, we are going to look and dive into, let me look at the Q&A just yet. All right. Now somebody asks, what are the post-purchase poor performances? Which is the method to appraise a project against IRR, payback period, and discounting? Now, Anonymous, these questions are project management related. I can assist you in responding to them. However, these are within the project management module, but that's fine, we'll deal with them. What's the best practice for negotiation on annual increase for a contract? Say a support wants to include CPI plus 2% in the anniversary of the contract. Kalani. All right. I'm not sure what you mean about the support. What's the best practice for negotiation on annual increase for a contract? Say, now you see what you need to do on increasing prices by the consumer price index. Firstly, as a buyer, why do you want to add 2.2% on the consumer price index? What you're saying is that the cost of goods in general and services have gone up. Okay, a supplier wants to include CPI plus 2%. So good question, Tolani. If you want to be a good buyer, rather do not take the additional 2%, unless the power, we'll talk about the power in negotiation as well. If the supplier is extremely dominant, but he must prove it that the 2% is justified. In all the price increases that must take place, you must only apply what the inflation is. That is a more fair way to deal with it. Okay. So do not accept additional 2%. Send. Now let me see. Answered. Okay, cool. That one is sorted. What are post-purchase poor performance? Post-purchase poor performance. What are you talking about here? Anyway, they are. I think you are mixing this with contract management. All right, within contract law, when you talk about post-contract, not post-purchase, it's post-contract. Poor performance. This is where the supplier beyond the contract is not performing well, but you have to have a standard to which you judge poor performance. Okay, you have to have a standard to which you judge poor performance. That is why when you put a contract in place, one of the things that you must negotiate is the key performance indicators. If somebody says, if you show me how I should perform, I will show you how my performance will be. If you don't show somebody, if you don't give somebody key performance indicators to say that I want you to do order fulfillment by so much, the quality must be this amount, the on-time delivery must be this amount, and so on, then you are going to give yourself a problem. You need to specify what the performance criteria should be in the key performance indicators, and then you can hold the suppliers accountable, okay? When you appraisal, let me just say, I'll say based on key performance KPIs. Okay, then the next one that you asked is about internal rate of return. Now, these are paybacks for a project, and the periods for payback and discounted rates and things like that. But which is the method to appraise project amongst? There are various that you can use. Internal rate of return, this is how the project benefits you based on the milestones that you had set for a project in order for you to achieve the specific either savings or the improvement in processes. If you are, for example, running a project that is going to help you in manufacturing certain items faster, you have to calculate how that project is going to help or to be of benefit to you at the end, and so on. Let me see. Okay, so that's that. Somebody has got their hand up before we go to the next. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Did you put your hand down? Okay, we'll carry on. Now, let's look at the sources of divergent positions. Now, we say it here, the basis of divergent positions in procurement, or rather in negotiations, is because when two or more parties come together, it is very likely that they are going to have divergent views. Okay, now, Morgan, you raised your hand. Please go ahead and talk before I start with the sources of divergent positions. Morgan? Okay. The next stop is in the next chapter when we'll give a chance to people to ask there as well. Okay, let's look at why these divergent positions can come. Now, negotiation, like I said, is a process in which two parties with divergent positions discuss and trade off concessions to reach a mutual agreement. Now, there are two types of sources of conflict within a negotiation. A negotiation can the conflict can either be caused by the content. Remember what the content is, the subject matter that you are talking about, what is being negotiated, or it can be caused by the process. How is it being negotiated? Now, sources of conflict regarding the process can arise due to the following. If there's lack of clarity before the negotiation, or the negotiation style when one party may adopt hard negotiation tactics that result in a win-lose outcome where the other favors building up relationships to gain a win-win, you have a conflict. And usually this is where the other party is more dominant than the one. So the one is pursuing a win-lose while the other is pursuing a win-win. There is going to be a conflict there. Cultural differences can also cause conflict, ladies and gentlemen. Do not underestimate the importance of dress code and the terms of address, okay? You may not think that, in fact, do not assume that everybody will accept the kind of dress code that you might have when you negotiate. That's why, as we talk about this, there's a component that talks about the cultural differences. Method of communication, such as face-to-face, and then team size and makeup. These also can cause conflicts. I remember one negotiation where a supplier brought in an external legal practitioner without communicating in advance. I always say, if you bring external parties or third parties who are not part of your organization, you must tell us in advance and tell us the reason why they are coming to be part of your team, okay? To minimize conflict, you have to agree on what are the ground rules, okay, with the other party in advance of the negotiation meeting, and manage divergent positions in order to achieve a win-win. So already once you start engaging and you talk about who is going to be part of your team and so on, and you find that you're not agreeing there, manage them before you get to the negotiation itself. It will help you in that regard. Now, Thomas Kilman, we've got a Thomas Kilman conflict model instrument, which we call the TKI. It outlines the positions available when entering a negotiation. It has the following two dimensions: the vertical axis, which shows assertiveness, and then the horizontal axis, which shows cooperativeness. Now, this produces 5 approaches to conflict resolution, each of which has its own objective. When you look at competing, in your books, you've got this, this picture here, which shows cooperativeness in the horizontal axis and then assertiveness in the vertical axis. The horizontal axis is concerned with conflict response in helping others get what they want. So, and then the vertical axis is concerned with the conflict response in attempting to get what you want. Okay, when you go further to the right, you, on the horizontal axis, you are saying you want the other party to get more. You are more cooperative. If you go vertically up, you are saying you want to be more assertive about what you want. Okay. All right, somebody has just unmuted. You want to talk, say something, or you just unmuted by mistake? Thank you. So when you are in competing, competing is objectives is to win. When somebody is really asserting themselves about their need, all they want is winning. When you accommodate, your objective is to yield. When you compromise, objective is to find middle ground. That's why you find the compromise is right in the middle of this matrix. And then collaborate, the objectives is to find a win-win. Now there are 2 parties in a conflict, so this results in 25 potential combinations of the style. Your study guide has got these different potential 25 potential combinations that you can have. Now, the collaborative approach is generally seen as the most effective one to adopt as an initial posture in most circumstances, assuming the ongoing relationship is important. And ladies and gentlemen, now, as we talk about commercial negotiation, you will see that CIPS standpoint of view is more so about collaborative than it is about competitive type of negotiations. It is more about win-win than it is about win-lose. Of course, there are certain times when you have to do win-lose, and we'll talk to you about that as we go along, where you don't need to have a strategic relationship with the supplier after the contract. Okay, do we want to pause now? I can see there's a question in here. Okay. Yes, Tolani, the slides will be type answer. Okay. All right.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Cindy.
Hi.
Hello, Cindy.
How are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks, and you?
Yes, I wanted to get clarity. You had said that the vertical axis and horizontal axes, you had stated vertical axis was to assist people to get what they want, and the horizontal was to attempt to get what you want. But when you showed the previous slide, it was the other way around. The horizontal was to help get what you wanted as, let's say, the company, and the vertical was to help others achieve what they wanted. So can you please provide clarity on that?
Yeah, the vertical one is assertive. You are being assertive about what you want as yourself. Okay, it could be, now here we are assuming that you are the buying organization. So the vertical one is saying that you are asserting yourself or to achieve what you want. The horizontal one is about cooperating with the other party to help them get what they want.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's look at the team involvement and the team management within the negotiations. Now, the stakeholder influences are very important. Why? Because stakeholders have most of them may have a huge interest in the outcome of a negotiation, depending on where they are at in this particular matrix, okay? When you have a stakeholder with high interest and high influence, then you need to know how to manage them and how you keep them informed or involved in the whole process of the negotiations. Now, CIPS recognizes three sets of stakeholders. You've got the internal stakeholder, then you've got the connected, and then you've got the external stakeholders. Now, the connected and external stakeholders are both external. The only difference with the connected one is that they've got a commercial or contractual agreement with you. The external stakeholders, in the general external stakeholders, are those that are outside the organization without a direct connection, either contractually or as a form of an employment contract. So these external stakeholders are normally referred to like community members of the community. Okay, they refer to external stakeholders. They are important to address when you are negotiating. Let's go wake ourselves up. Connected stakeholders normally have a commercial agreement. This is where you find your suppliers. This is where you find your banks that gave you the money to procure the item that you are wanting to procure. Then you've got internal stakeholders. Now, these are directly connected. They are employees. You've got different levels of employees, such as directors. Then you've got managing executives. You've got your chief procurement officer, and you've got various types of internal stakeholders, including your colleagues. Everybody that is within your organization with an employment contract is regarded as an internal stakeholder. So you need to be able to structure the method of dealing with them, identify these stakeholders, know what their needs are, identify stakeholder levels of influence and interest, and then plot them on a map, on a stakeholder map that is going to show, place them either in, involve them. If they've got high interest and high influence, you must involve them. If they've got high influence with low interest, engage them, and so on. All right, well, let's go to chapter number 1.2. Do we have any questions, ladies and gentlemen? We can pause here. Let me look at the chart. I know we're not supposed to put questions on the chart, but if there's anybody who put them there, we will be able to resolve them. Okay, cool. I think there wasn't. No questions. Yeah, cool. Let's carry on. Differentiating between the types of approaches that can be pursued in commercial negotiations. Now, we are going to talk about the two main approaches that you will use in commercial negotiations. Okay, the first approach that is the most popular and the most preferred is the integrative approach to negotiations. Now, this is used when the parties are attempting to create more of something of value to share among themselves, and it is called collaborative negotiation or win-win. There's another approach which is called distributive approach to negotiation. Now, this is where parties want to divide something or distribute something of value, also known as zero-sum approach, where no one gains. Somebody might win and the other person loses. And I'll explain to you a little bit later that when you have a pie that you have to look at and your relationship is important, you need to always have an integrative approach or a collaborative approach to negotiation, which is called the win-win. Distributive approach to negotiation. If you remember the Krelchik matrix, we talked about it in L4M1. When you have non-critical products that you are procuring, and these are products where you do not have, there's no complexity of supply market, and they are not strategic to your organization. It means that you've got a lot of suppliers available. It also means that these items do not generate much income for you. Then you can use a distributive approach with no issue at all. It means that you don't need to have a relationship post-contract award with that supplier. You award them the contract, they deliver, and you say goodbye, and off they go. Because next time you go out to the market, you may have to choose somebody else because the market is highly saturated. All right. So it is important for you to understand that the approach that you use in negotiation, these are the two main approaches that we use in commercial negotiations. The approach that you use depends on the kind of relationship that you're going to have when you put a contract in place. Let's look at the win-win, which is a collaborative approach. Now, this collaborative or integrative approach to negotiation is the best approach to achieve the objectives. And CIPS believes that procurement and supply chain professionals should aim for a mutually acceptable solution for both parties, where appropriate. Okay? Where appropriate. However, the negotiation is, if the negotiation is once off, or no long-term relationship is envisaged, the win-lose approach would be best. So you go ahead and do a win-lose. Okay? Do you have examples, ladies and gentlemen, where you would naturally do a win-lose approach? If I'm negotiating to buy a house, I am the property buyer. My responsibility is assets, and I buy property. I work for this conglomerate that owns properties everywhere, and I'm buying property from this buyer. What kind of negotiation approach would I adopt, and why? That is a question for you, ladies and gentlemen. So let me know anybody who wants to answer that. Yes,
Win-lose.
And why? Cabello?
I will say win-win, because you are trying to maintain a long-term relationship.
Okay, Margaret, what do you want to say?
Hello?
Yes, go for it, Margaret.
I will go for win-lose, because I think there is any relationship that you're going to build with that kind of a person.
Okay.
I would also say win-lose, based on the fact that there is really, after we've signed the offer and the attorneys are doing their work, there's really no relationship post, once we've signed the offer. So, okay. Yeah.
I agree with you, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, Lucky, let's carry on. I'll give you another chance for the next questions that I'm going to ask. Somebody says they cannot hear. I don't know, please check your sound and connect again. It's important that you hear properly. Somebody just said they just can't hear anyone talking. We're going ahead with conversation, but somebody's struggling. Please check your sound and see that it is okay. Yeah, you are absolutely right. When you are negotiating for land, you go for a win-lose, okay? Try to get a win-lose. And I'll give you some of the key practical ways for you to get the best deal in procurement. Now, I always joke with my students that procurement is in the Bible. Those of you who read the Bible, in Proverbs, you'll see where it says, it's bad, says the buyer, but once he's gone, he starts bragging about the deal. And that is one approach that the buyers need to adopt, especially when they are in these win-lose type of approaches. And you'll see it when we deal with tactics, how you try and not to overemphasize the beauty of what you see at the supplier's site. And I keep telling when I was still in the corporate world, I'll tell my buyers that I need you not to be shocked when you go to a factory, or you're going to inspect a factory. Don't get impressed by the beauty that you see or the technology that you see, and you stand there bewildered. You keep saying, wow, how great this thing looks like. Oh, this is so beautiful. You must show that it is something that is normal, okay? The moment a buyer or a supplier knows that you are swept off your feet by their technology, then they'll put their price very high, all right? It is just something that you must learn. And in my corporate days, I made sure that my buyers traveled to see suppliers, whether it's overseas, wherever we procured equipment from. Because when I was also a young buyer, my managers made sure that I traveled the world so that I could, that excitement when you meet suppliers from Europe, you get so overwhelmed, was not there anymore, because you interact with them. Even the equipment is normal. And that's how you guys need to understand. If you get overwhelmed, let me take an example of a salesman. You're trying to buy a new car, and the salesman comes, he polishes the car, and they do it just because they want to catch those untrained buyers off their feet. And you start telling them how great this car looks even before you buy it. Be sure that he will not bring his price down. That is just a tactic that you use in procurement, okay? Anyway, let's carry on. So win-win approach is the best. And like I said, when you have a once-off type of negotiation and no long-term relationship is needed, then you go for the win-lose. Each party should be aware of their own bargaining position and what they want to achieve. The resulting contract is more likely to be formed in an atmosphere of mutual trust and common interest. So here is where you need to have a contract, or rather a relationship beyond the negotiation. Excuse me. A contrast with this is a situation where a buyer drives prices down to a level where a supplier profits on the sales are marginal. The supplier may agree reluctantly to this price reduction, but when the buyer needs their assistance and when the supplier will then the supplier will extract the highest price that they can get, they'll get even with you. So what we're saying here is that when you are pursuing a win-lose in an agreement, in a commercial agreement, which is important for the relationship, you might end up losing because the supplier may lose the price, but they will be very hard on you. Okay, so let's go to the win-lose approach, which is the distributive. So remember the terminologies as well, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said to you, when you are dealing with multiple choice type of questions, you have to have clear in your mind. Don't get confused. If somebody wakes you up at 02 in the morning, you must be able to tell them what is the difference between distributive and integrative negotiation, okay? Collaborative or adversarial negotiation. Now, integrative, collaborative, win-win is one and the same thing. Now we're looking at distributive. So we have distributive, lose-lose, and adversarial. Those three terminologies mean the same thing, okay? So if you've got a place where you're writing, write that down because it's important that you've got it very clear in your mind and you don't mix the two. You don't start waffling everywhere. So win-lose. So in distributive bargaining, which is the adversarial. Now, why is it called adversarial? Because you are aiming to win and you will operate. Maggie, you want to say something before I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Please, can you make it clear for me here? Win-lose is it's win-lose, adversarial, competitive, zero-sum.
No. There are three things. Yeah. So the zero-sum is the concept that is used where whatever is gained by one side is lost by the other. It is within the distributive approach. Now, zero-sum describes the scenario of the distributive approach. What I need you to get clear in your mind is the terminologies used to describe these types of negotiation. So the first three is integrative, collaborative, and win-win. These are in the same basket and mean the same. Then you've got distributive, adversarial, and win-lose. These also mean the same thing. Do you understand, Margaret?
Yes, I do, sir.
Thank you. So we're now talking about the distributive type. Do you have a follow-up, Margaret? Okay, let's carry on. Distributive bargaining is used when the parties are trying to divide something that is of a fixed quantity. Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, that sometimes you may, because of your inability to see beyond the bigger picture, you might think that the pie is limited. I normally give an example to my students or in class, all right, where I get a lemon. Now, what are the things that you can do with a lemon? What are some of the things that you can do with a lemon?
You can mix it in a drink.
Yeah, especially now that it's cold, right? To get rid of the flu. Any one of you does baking of cakes and not magwinya, but cakes or or scones? Anybody?
You can use it as flavoring.
Thank you.
And also
flavoring.
To cleanse your face.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know there was some beauty people here. So you can also clean your face with it.
Yes, yes, Charles.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you for that good lesson. Now we've got 3 people. Okay, I like baking. Now, so what I used for my lemon, I would get a lemon and I'll grate the skin off and put it in the dough. You notice that. And then, of course, so we might have these 3 different interests. So somebody wants to use it for zest, that's the skin. Another one wants a lemon for the juice to take because they've got flu. Another one wants to use the lemon for their face. Okay, let's just assume that we've got the 2, one for the juice, one for the zest, okay? Now, if you do not understand that there are different needs that the 2 parties have, and you have not gone beyond the positions, I want a lemon is my position. But the question is, why do you want a lemon? And I'm preempting what I'll tell you a bit later about interests versus positions. My position is I want this lemon, but my interest is the lemon. I want the zest. I want to grate it, throw away the rest, and just make my nice cupcake. The other person wants to chop off the skin, throw it away, and they want their juice. Now, because we have failed to understand and expand on what our needs are and understand each other's needs, we make the lemon look like it's a fixed quantity. So ordinarily, if we want to say, let's be fair to each other, how are we going to split that lemon? Get a knife and cut it into 2. So everybody does not go away with what is, the full of what they're looking for. And what I'm submitting to you right now is that the win-lose is always associated with a zero sum. And I think this is what Margaret, we wanted to say. It is associated with a zero sum. Although one person goes saying they have won and the other one lost, it ultimately states that there is whatever is gained by one side is lost by the other. So you may have gained something, you lose some. This one who gained something, the other one has lost something. Okay, so the parties assume that in order for one party to gain something, the other party must give up another thing. So distributive bargaining tactics rarely assume the pie will be divided in half. Okay. So you have to understand that when you are doing a distributive or any negotiation for that matter, let's make an assumption that it is possible for us to expand the pie so that everybody goes away smiling, winning. Examples of situation where a distributive bargaining is needed: property and land sales. We talked about this, which is we dealt with, and purchasing situations where price is the only variable. Trade union pay negotiations. Now we are even going out of commercial negotiations now, ladies and gentlemen. Government budget distributions and things like that. These you can use win-lose, but where you have a long relationship, you must avoid them. So here is, I've put for you here what the comparative approach is between distributive view and integrative view. Okay, you can have a look at that. Let's go to the pragmatic, or I put in brackets here practical, because pragmatic looks like a big word, but it simply just means practical and principled styles of negotiations. And you may have guessed that these principled styles are based on the collaborative approach, which is win-win, integrative, or collaborative. Those 3 mean the same. So the principled negotiation process using an integrative approach to find a mutually agreed shared outcome. Some criticisms of the principled approach to negotiation are based on the assumption that all parties are reasonable, open to a logical approach, want to reach an agreement, and are are focused on achieving the best outcome over the long term. Now, this is a criticism that you need to be aware of, ladies and gentlemen. When you go into negotiation, it is not good to make such an assumption that all parties are reasonable. It is not all parties that are reasonable. You need to go into negotiation knowing that the other party is looking for after their own interests, but then let them unlock those interests and present them on the table, and then you start to see what you can trade, what are the common grounds that you can look at, okay? Here are the 4 fundamental principles of the principled types of negotiation. It looks at people, interests, options, and criteria. Basically, the first principle about people says separate people from the problem. Now, you see, this approach on principled negotiation can be used even when you are negotiating in normal life, okay? Between you and your friends, between you and somebody that you are connected with. If you separate the person from the issue, then you will find that it becomes easier to resolve that situation. The relationship can get back to normal because you depersonalize it and you are focusing on the issue that both of you need to resolve. But the moment you start attacking personalities and tell people how terrible they are, and you stereotype them because they are Chinese, or because they are Indians, or because they are Black, or because they are white, or things like that, ladies and gentlemen, that becomes a recipe for a divided kind of relationship. So depersonalize those issues. The issue may have come out of a person's mouth, but leave the individual as they are and then deal with what has been said, okay? Without assuming that the intention they said this was because of ABC. Focus on interest, not positions. Now, positions are easily visible. I told you about the zest versus lemon juice. My position is I want a lemon. Okay, I put my demand across. I want a lemon. I haven't even given you a reason why I want it. I want it because I want to use the zest. The other person says I want a lemon because I want to use the juice. So you have to go to the underlying reasons why people present certain positions. The next one is invent options for mutual gain. Invent rather options for mutual gain. How do we both benefit out of this? Okay. Insist on using objective criteria and so on. Let's look at setting targets and creating alternatives to a negotiated agreement. Let me look at the Q&A because I see that somebody has. What is the difference between pragmatic and principled approach? How do they relate? Okay, pragmatic approach is pragmatic is basically saying that it is a practical way of doing negotiation. The principled approach could be a pragmatic approach. Why? Because it focuses on the win-win approach to a negotiation. So pragmatic, the two of them, pragmatic basically means what is the practical way, the practical approach to negotiations? What is the most realistic way of negotiating in order for you to achieve a strategic relationship with a supplier, to be successful with a supplier relationship? And so if you want to use a pragmatic approach which will be successful, then you will use a principled approach. Okay, so that is how the two of them relate. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Let's go to the next slide. Let me just check here. Okay. Let's look at the setting targets and creating alternatives to a negotiated agreement. Let me start firstly by saying that every negotiation you enter in, you have to have a negotiation strategy. And most organizations are going to require that that negotiation strategy is being approved by the relevant people. Why? Because it must include the variables or tradables which have limits to them, okay? Which have achievement targets to them. When you put a target to a variable or a tradable, it becomes an objective for your negotiation. So variables are items that you are willing to trade in a negotiation. Okay, you say, I'm going to trade payment terms. Okay, these payment terms. Now, payment terms, the longer the payment terms, the more it hurts the supplier, the more it benefits the buyer. But if they are shorter, it will benefit the supplier and it might hurt the buyer. So you may have a good agreement there to trade payment terms so that you can get an early settlement agreement. I pay you early, you give me a discount, or you give me a settlement agreement, and so on. So you have to understand how to trade these things. So you have to generate as many tradables as you can before entering into negotiations, okay? The more tradables you can identify, the more likely there will be an opportunity for a win-win outcome, as they can prevent deadlock. Some possible variables are the following. I've put them down here. I've talked about price, payment terms, length of contract, supply agreement, and so on. So once targets are set for each of these above variables, you get your objectives, okay? For each objective and variable tradable, you need to establish the following. Number one, you have to have the must achieve, which is a minimum, target, or maximum you can concede on this point. Then intended to achieve, which is a realistic target. Then like to achieve, which is a stretch target to try to achieve on this point. Now, before entering a negotiation, you need to have an agreed position with all the stakeholders, budget holders, regarding your targets and what you can trade with them. So remember these strings: must achieve, intended to achieve, and like to achieve, okay? If you achieve your like, hey, you are an excellent negotiator. All right, if you achieve your like, but it's important. Here we go. The zone of potential agreement, the ZOPA. So for each of the transactions that you have to have a zone of possible agreement. Now, I've written these in Rand, and you can put your own currency wherever you are watching us from, or you're listening to us from, wherever you are in Africa, but the essence is the same. So the negotiator must think about what will happen if there is no agreement. When you enter into negotiations, ladies and gentlemen, you must know what is going to happen if you don't have an agreement. The alternative may not be attractive, but it is an alternative, and this is important. If I can just talk briefly about this picture here on the far right, I hope you can see where my mouse is going around. At the bottom here, you've got the seller's preference. Now, the seller wants to sell at the highest price possible. His preferred price is 1,200, for example, and his lowest price that he can accept to sell this item for is 860 bucks. Now, beyond that, you have to have a partner. If you do not get the minimum, if you are the seller. Now, let's look at the buyer. The buyer's preferred position is a very low price, 800 bucks. Now, the seller has already said, if you go below 860, I'm getting out of this thing. Now, the buyer doesn't mind paying as low as possible, but you have to have a limit, because remember, we have to have a balance between quality and price, because if something becomes too cheap, then it might have been compromised in terms of its quality and performance. So the maximum that the supplier is able to pay, the cross between the minimum of the supplier and the maximum what the buyer is prepared to pay, the area in between that is called the ZOPA, or the zone of potential agreement. Some authors call it the zone of possible agreement. If you have this area here, you can agree on the price that needs to be paid. And basically, that's what the BATNA is. The best alternative to a negotiated agreement is the concept where you have to reach you have to create an alternative in advance where you go to if the agreement does not agree with you, or if the results of the negotiation are not in agreement with you. And ladies and gentlemen, I need you to know this, that not every negotiation you enter in will result in finalization of a contract. That is why a buyer must always have a partner with them whenever they enter into negotiations. Any questions? Okay, yes, Maggie. Margaret, go for it.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, sir.
Go ahead, Margaret.
I just want to understand. I just want to understand something here. Between Zopa and BATNA, what is my plan B there?
What is your what?
Plan B.
Plan B is your BATNA.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's go to
it's a bit tricky.
That's all right. That's all right.
Thank you.
We're here to help you, Margaret. Don't worry. Don't worry. We'll get through this together. So explain how the balance of power. Now, balance of power is fairly short. I'm not going to take too long on this. We need to understand a few principles about it. Number one, that power is the ability to exercise influence over others. And the judicious use of power is essential in negotiation, because if you don't have power, it is difficult for you to secure a win. All right. Now, power may take various forms. You've got overt power, you've got covert power, you've got structural power, which within a buyer-supplier type of relationship. Other personal power that individuals would have would come from legitimacy, or expert when they know their stuff well, their subject matter, reward power, they can control resources, referent power, cohesive power, information power, okay? All this, and a lot of guys who've been working in jobs for ages, they hold on to this information power, they don't want to share it. It is power indeed. Okay, now, what about organizational power? Comparing the relative power of purchasers and suppliers. The balance of power then can be described as the distribution of the capability or power to influence or bargain between the parties to a negotiation. So where does much of the capability lie between the parties to a negotiation? When one party has all the bargaining power, they can become bullish, okay, and one-sided in the negotiation. So it is always good to have a balance of power. You as a buyer must understand the areas where you are going to have power, whether you can realistically negotiate in the first place. You need to decide that. How ambitious you can be regarding objectives. Do you have a walk away? Tabileng, do you have a question? There are three levels to consider when considering the relative power of buyers and suppliers. What are those? You need to look at the macro environment. You understand the wider forces that influence balance of power, okay, and identification of sources. Maggie, write your question in the Q&A. I'll come to you at the end. I see your hand. Just write your questions in the Q&A. Thanks. Now, when you look at the macroeconomics, it will help you to understand the different forces within which an organization is operating. You look at the steeple or the pestle. These are the same. They are used to analyze the power dynamics within an organization. Okay, then for each type of factor, the buyer should ask the following questions. What are those questions that you should ask? Number one, what trends or changes could affect my power? Number two, could any trends or changes significantly affect the other party? Okay, so we need to look at those. So the next one, so you've got macro environment, and then you've got micro environment, where you look at the industry structure, you check out the rivalry in the industry. Now, macro environment is seen in view of the Porter's 5 forces. So you look at the intensity, what kind of competition exists in this industry. It will show you how the power is with a particular supplier. If the supplier has got no substitutes, there are no entrants, no new entrants in the market, there are no substitute products, then you know that you are dealing with a monster of a supplier, because he's got massive power he can yield in the negotiation. Supply positions, one-to-one organization power, where use supplier segmentation. This helps you as a buyer to classify your suppliers based on the relative importance by considering the goods they supply in terms of supply risk and expenditure. Now, what this means is that, so the first one is you look at the macroeconomics, okay? Then you look at the micro. The macroeconomics looks at the steeple, all the environmental factors that affect organizational performance. Then the second one is you look at micro. Micro looks at the competitiveness of a particular industry, and you look at Porter's 5 forces. You understand where the supply is positioned. Then the third one to check a supplier's power is the one-to-one organizational positioning, one-to-one, where you segment the supplier based on their importance to your organization. If you see that the supplier is a strategic supplier to you, okay, you will need to pay close attention. Also, look at the supplier preferencing matrix. When you look at the supplier position model or supplier preferencing, it shows how the supplier views you as a buyer, okay? Because there are some of the buying organizations that don't pay on time. Their documents are so complex. They're always returning products and You are a nuisance supplier. You can be regarded as a nuisance, and you will not have sufficient negotiating power when you sit to negotiate with suppliers. All right. Let me go through this. I will pause when we finish the chapter, and then I'm going to answer the questions. How purchasers can improve leverage with suppliers? How do you improve leverage? Number one of the things that you need to do in order to improve your leverage is you need to do vendor base reduction, okay? Concentration of spend, where you target spend. Could you mute, please? Somebody's mother is looking for them, and we can hear it here. So you go to a place where you do consolidation or volume concentration, okay? Where you form purchasing consortium. You can create leverage for yourself, where you'll see, you look at the microeconomics, you see that this supply is very strong. Then you can bundle volumes. Go to, if you are in an organization which has subsidiaries and so on, you can do one procurement initiative, and it will give you some very strong leverage. Okay, the leverage can also be increased through analytics. When you do spend analytics, you understand who in your organization is spending money, how they are spending it, and how much they are spending on which categories. You do that and you create volume leverage. Okay, increasing leverage with suppliers, you have to ensure that you become so innovative. Otherwise, the suppliers will remember they are looking after their own interests, and they may not be able to give you a chance to negotiate evenly. Leverage can be increased by projecting the organization as an attractive customer, even if it's not currently a big spender. This includes where you have simple procurement processes, you pay them promptly, engage the supplier in innovative opportunities. When you are like that, ladies and gentlemen, when you pay suppliers on time, you create yourself some real good leverage. So customer attractiveness is something that you need to look through. I've gone into detail. That slide gives you a summary, but here is the detail. And I'll be generous enough to share with you these slides so that you can go through them. This is just talking about the supplier the attractiveness of the buyer to the supplier. And it shows you how, if your spend is high and your attractiveness high, then you are core into the supply, according to the supplier's view of the customer segment. But if your spend is low and your attractiveness is low, attractiveness is shown by is low because you don't pay promptly, you are not, you don't have a very good brand, you're not ethical, you don't respect confidentiality, then you are seen as a nuisance as a buyer. So the best place to be in view of your supplier to gain proper power is to be core with the supplier. Okay. Let me go to my questions now and address them. BATNA, basis alternative to negotiated agreement. But Zana, you just said that, and you haven't asked a question. I don't know what you want me to say about this. Then Zandile says, please explain the relationship between walk away point and BATNA. Okay, I'll do that. What are the power dynamics in collaborative negotiation? Does the use of power apply at all? Oh yeah, of course they do. That means it's a big yes. You see, Mashudu, if you do not show any form of power in a negotiation, people will not treat you as an equal. So they will not pursue a win-win in collaborative negotiation. You have to, when you deal with a buying organization, demonstrate that you have power. They also show their power, and you are agree that we are both powerful. We can negotiate on equal terms. But if you go in there and you do not demonstrate any form of power in the way that I have shown you here, through expert knowledge, through this, and then you become like a weak link in the relationship, and the other party will take advantage of you. Always keep this in mind, that the negotiating party in commercial negotiation is not coming out for them to lose. They are coming out to get the best out of the deal. Okay. Please explain the relationship between walkaway point and BATNA. You see, the walkaway point is the point where you seek a BATNA. The walkaway point is a point where you seek a BATNA. Okay. So they could be one and the same thing. The only thing is the BATNA is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It is a point where you, you walk away. Banter, what are you talking about, Cindy? Best alternative to negotiate agreement, banter. I don't know what you're saying here, banter. Oh, sorry, Cindy. Based on, yeah, okay, cool. Shall I carry on responding to Anonymous? Sorry, okay, cool. That's fine. Let's carry on, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just say okay here to get this one disappear. Thank you, Basizana. Cindy, if you want to clarify, you can do that before we go to the next topic. It is BATNA. BATNA. B-A-T-N-A, not B-A-N-T-A. Okay. And this one.
I'm sorry, I was trying. Yes, it is B-A-T-N-A. I was trying to respond to Anonymous.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, let's carry on, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's identify the different types of relationships that impact on commercial negotiation. It's a fairly short, then we'll take a 5 minutes body break. Then we will come back again. I'll do it in 5 minutes, I think, and then we can take a 5 minutes body break. The relationship spectrum really explains to you what kind of relationships you have. Now, what I've done here is I've shown you from another author's perspective in terms of the types of relationships you have. And at the bottom, you've got the one from your study guide, okay? What these types of relationships are showing is that depending on the closeness or let me use the word closeness or the competitiveness of the industry, you will have specific types of relationships. Okay, the more you go towards the right, you aim for more collaborative type. Now, the top one, it shows you the kind of negotiations approach you have, collaborative, and then on the left side, you've got competitive, which is an adversarial type of negotiation. So you need to decide on what kind of relationship you want to have, depending, and then that is going to influence the type of negotiation approach. Okay, the Krochik matrix as well will show you or advise you what kind of relationship you should have. If a supplier's product falls within the strategic items, then you are aiming for a long-term mutually beneficial relationship. Now, how do you build relationship based on reputation? Reputation is defined as the belief of opinions that are generally held about someone of something. From a procurement perspective, reputation strength is a supplier might be based on their quality, low cost, reliability, and so on. So as a buyer, you should be aware of the local and international brands. So reputation is also a perception, and it has many facets, okay? So buyers should retain a professional skepticism when it comes to relying on supplier reputations. Now, I don't know how many of you are in South Africa, so if I do apologize for those of you who do not know the best local team in this country for where football is concerned, and it is called Orlando Pirates. Suppliers can buy reputation through various events, e.g. sponsoring my favorite team called Orlando Pirates. Okay, they want to identify themselves with sponsoring Orlando Pirates. I know, I'm not sure if there are many South Africans, they will agree with me. In the past, when I said this, the guys who support these weak teams like I don't even remember their names. I think it's something called Kaiser Chiefs or something. You know those small teams, that small team, that one, and that other small team called Mamelodi Sundowns. They were up against me. I said, oh, their teams are better. But anyway, let's carry on. So ladies and gentlemen, what suppliers will do is that they'll try as much as possible to put their name on something that is trending. So buyers need to have a certain level of skepticism. Buyers must have time to evaluate the supplier beyond their reputation to technical capability. Then you know that you are assured of getting the very best, okay? Trust by verifying, according to Ronald Reagan, you have to verify. Now, trust, you just don't tell somebody to trust me. Why must I trust you? I have to trust you because I've verified that you are worthy of trust. Now, do not trust anybody if they have not proven themselves. If you there are these three types of trust. Number one, contractual trust based on the contract. Okay, if I have a contract solid with you, I'm going to trust you. But this is the weakest source of trust because it is based on a contract. Competency trust based on professional qualification, but the goodwill trust, the other person has your interest at heart. This is the strongest type of trust. Ladies and gentlemen, when you have this level of trust with the supplier, they will go out of their way to help you run your business because you have goodwill trust. So it is important that you have this level of trust. Signs of trust in business relationship, we'll talk about mutual agreed and managed objectives, sharing information. All these are levels of trust. How do you repair a relationship if it breaks down? Okay. When a buyer has a partner, this may not be an issue, but if you don't have a partner and the relationship breaks down, you need to make a plan. So procurement will find evidence where the supplier blames the customer and the other way around. And usually it's our end users that mess up the supplier buyer relationship. And when we try to intervene as procurement, They will say, oh no, this procurement, do you have your interest? But it is your responsibility to manage these relationships. So procurement must use their conflict management skills to resolve this. Firstly, you must establish the facts that led to the situation and separate people from the issues, put in place agreed changes, and ensure that you restart the relationship properly. Let me go to the Q questions and see. Somebody is Buccaneer for life, anonymous. You are my brother. Bazizana, I don't know what team you support, my dear. Okay, Lucky, I hear you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's take yes, through pirates, Iris. Yes, pirates, the best all the way. Thank you, Morgan. You are my brother for life. All right, guys, let's take maybe 7 minutes. We start at 7:45, chapter 2. We will go through them. So I'll see you in 7 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. Let's get back to where we were. All right, let me just deal with a couple of questions. Is Goodwill trust at person level or organizational level? Now, it has to be at both. The goodwill of an organization has to be at both. Now, it is more so for the organization at organizational level, so that suppliers should be able to deal with the organization because they trust the organization's ability. But at the same time, you cannot remove the individuals, because we are not robots or machines that do not have emotions and so on. So even the way that you as a buyer operates in front of a supplier will also have has a huge impact on how they perceive the organization as a whole. All right, and more so if the person that they are interacting with is at a very senior level. Okay, so you need to really put your best foot forward, or put your best behavior forward. That's why if a buyer is being unrealistic in their demands from a supplier, then the organization will suffer. The organization might be a good organization, but if the buyers are not being good towards the suppliers, then it is a problem. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, hope you made your nice cup of coffee and you are ready for the next session. Okay, let's start looking at describing the types of costs and prices in commercial negotiation. Now, this topic becomes of prime importance. Why? Because one of the biggest things that we negotiate in commercial negotiation is the pricing of products. All right, sorry, my dogs are just misbehaving outside. Just give me a second. Sorry about that. Let's carry on. Okay. The different types of costs. Like I was saying, that costs are one of the most important outcomes of a negotiation. All right. Now, let's describe the types of costs and prices in commercial negotiations. Okay, starting with direct costs. Now, direct costs are those costs of a product or service directly attributable, traceable to its production. For example, the cost of labor and materials, all right? So those are direct costs. Now, indirect costs are those costs that are not directly attributable to production. For example, the cost of advertising and etc. Now, these are often referred to as overheads, okay? Now, variable and fixed costs. So fixed costs do not vary much with the amount produced or output volume. For example, rent or travel and so on. Then variable costs are those which vary with the amount. So the cost of raw materials in the production process will vary depending on the amount of orders that you receive. Then you've got semi-variable costs. Now, these are costs that have a fixed and variable element, such as utilities, like for electricity. Now, if you maintain same production volumes, the electricity cost is going to stay the same, but it will vary if you increase production or you work extra hours. So fixed costs are not fixed forever and will increase if, for example, a business expands. Let's look at the cost methods such as absorption, marginal, variable, and activity-based. Very interesting concepts here. Now, absorption costing. Now, these are the methods that suppliers use to cost their products. Absorption costs absorbs indirect cost into the direct cost related to a specific job. Okay, now I want you to pay very good attention here, because these are some of the very interesting definitions that you're going to find here about absorption costs. You always need to ask yourself, especially you guys who are state-owned buyers, if you work within the state-owned companies, even in your own countries, and if there is a local supplier and you're comparing their pricing with an international supplier, you must always ask yourself whether the kind of costing that they did was not absorption costing, okay? For the item that they are trying to produce for you. Now, I'll explain this to you, whether they did not do absorption costing. So what happens here in absorption costing is that the full indirect costs are burdened on a particular product, okay? You understand that they are placed on a particular product in such a way that when you bring in your item for production, your item is marginally costed. And marginal costing involves calculating how much it will cost to manufacture an additional unit. So an additional to what? So for the very first portion of the production, all the overheads are absorbed in a particular product. Then you bring in your item. Your item is manufactured on a marginal costing, which means that the supplier prices his product only based on the direct costs that are involved in your product. It is beneficial if you are pursuing a massive cost reduction. So what happens is that when you find a company that already exists, a supplier already exists, they're supplying these products. I need you to pay close attention here because it's important. They're supplying these products on the production line. They've got all their overheads. Now their overheads, we said overheads are fixed. They do not change. They have got overheads and they burden them on this product. Then you bring in a new product line. Okay, you bring in a product line. And the new product line, strictly speaking, should not be burdened with the other overheads. Okay, but in general, they will spread the overheads to that production line so that these guys here who brought in their work earlier can also get a relief, you know, but normally they don't give such kind of relief or reduce prices to old customers. They continue charging them the same. You bring in your own products, and what we say here is that you may want to insist when negotiating with suppliers, buyers may seek to persuade the supplier to price a product that covers their marginal costs only, okay, rather than add absorption costs, that is all the indirect costs as well. All right, so if you don't understand, let me know, but it's important that you use this strategy when you negotiate pricing. Activity-based costing is an alternative to absorption costing. So remember, absorption cost burdens the indirect costs into direct costs. So you lump them into all these direct costs. Now, activity-based costing says every cent that I spend on this product, I will put it in the cost. So this is where all the activities involved in production, including supervisory activities, everything is burdened into the price. It is called activity-based pricing. This is an approach to overhead allocation that considers how underlying activities that enable products or services to be delivered are apportioned across products, across products or departments, okay? It is called product activity-based costing. It is different from absorption costing. All right. Do you have any questions before I go to the next one? Okay, yes, Cindy, you've got your hand up. Let me look at Babala. Babala asks, please make a practical example on absorption costing and marginal costing. Okay, like I said, here is an example. There was one company a while back when I was still when I was still practicing. Okay, now I'm a lecturer. When I was still practicing, maybe I'm practicing somewhere else as well, but that's, yeah. When I was still practicing. So this company was producing high pressure pipe work, and they were supplying those high pressure pipes to hospitals, to everybody who has a pressure vessel. They were using those pressure pipes and those pressure vessels. So what they did was they did absorption costing for all the products that were coming into the country that were being distributed to local buyers, and absorbed all the overheads, and they marginally costed all the products that were going for the export market. Why? Because they needed to earn foreign exchange. So when you marginally cost, what you do is you only attribute the direct cost to a product, and then the indirect costs are put somewhere else. I hope you hear that. Somebody had their hand up. Okay. All right, let's carry on, ladies and gentlemen. Let's look at volumes, margins, and markups, and their impact on pricing. Now, this also goes without saying that volumes are important in the way that you need to bundle volumes. It is called economies of scale. Before procurement goes out for a procurement transaction to the market, you need to understand what the departments are looking for across the board. So if I've got a need from human resources, and human resource is looking for stationery, before you approach the market, you need to go to quality department, go to finance, and say, I've got this request from human resource of stationery. Do you also need stationery? Because that will help in economies of scale. The more the volume, the lower the price eventually will be, because of this concept of distributing of overheads over a larger portion of items. Okay, Margaret, you want to say something? Margaret, you raised your hand. Okay, let's carry on. Then margins and markups are different, okay? The difference between the two is purely based on what they are calculated out of. So a markup is calculated, is the amount added to the cost of an item to get to its selling price, and it's expressed as a percentage, while a margin is a margin is simply an amount added to the cost of an item expressed as a percentage of the selling price. Okay, one is compared to the cost price, the other one is compared to the selling price, which is the price. And a markup is in percentage is the price minus the cost. The cost is what you paid, and normally the price is higher than the cost. So the cost is lower than the price. Okay, so you buy something, say for 50 Rand, and you sell it for 150, then your markup is 200%. Okay. Your margin, on the other hand, is expressed as a percentage of the selling price and not as a percentage of the cost. So it's a very interesting comparison to make. So it's important for you to remember that. Let's go to the next one. Let's look at the different pricing strategies that suppliers would use when they are pricing your products to sell to you. Now, a supplier would typically have pricing strategies, policies for items or services. A brief description of these strategies is as follows. Number one, they might have a cost plus pricing. Now, a cost plus is where the supplier calculates the total variable and fixed cost and it adds a percentage. Now, I must say here that it is only agreeable and reasonable costs that the supplier must add. The highest risk with the cost plus type of pricing is with the buyer, okay? Because the supplier will always justify every element that they want to add to that cost. It is not the best thing for you to do. Now, premium pricing is different. Premium pricing is where they charge high pricing, which are not even connected with any cost structure. And these are used because the item is in its early part of the product life cycle. So you need to understand when you go into procurement that you understand what the product life cycle is so that you do not pay premium pricing. The next one is penetrating pricing. Now, penetrating pricing is where suppliers give crazy discounts just to enter the market or to grow an existing market. Now, these are also dangerous types of pricing. What I said earlier is when you are dealing with international suppliers versus local suppliers, you must know that international suppliers will likely do penetrating pricing or they might do marginal price cost pricing, okay, where the supplier recovers only the variable cost elements in its price. What about the fixed part? We see the variable is the cost of raw materials. What about the fixed parts? Their overheads and things like that. They have absorbed them into other products. So you must be very careful because a number of international suppliers do this to export markets. They do marginal costing or they do penetrating pricing because they want the local industry in those countries to fail, and then they'll raise the price up. You have to be very careful. So go dive deeper into the cost structure. Don't just accept any cheap price for short-term gain, because in the long term, you might find that if you kill competition, you might pay a bigger price. Market pricing, this is where the supplier is prepared to the price is based on the market, which is okay. Just some comments now on cost modeling and analytics. The cost models are created with assumptions and estimates of supplier costs and profits against different volumes, time period, and contract terms. Elements of the cost models will include direct labor and so on. So what we say here, ladies and gentlemen, is that when it's a very detailed approach when you do cost modeling, which we cannot dive in at this stage, but for purposes of passing your exam, just know this, Now, when you do cost modeling, you must include all the different components of the cost structure and cost them so that you build a should cost, all right? And once you build a should cost, it gives you opportunity to negotiate properly around the table. Procurement analytic tools extract data and process it from financial information to support cost reduction initiatives. And so you have these types of procurement tools which support the following category: visibility, P2P process compliance, pricing and contracts, risk and fraud detection, and so on. Okay. Should cost, I talked about the should cost earlier, that you need to be able to do analytics internally to be able to arrive at a target price, which you go in. You never go into a negotiation without knowing what you should pay. And this is what is called the should cost analysis. I want to go to the last bullet point here, which says secondary data and information such as benchmark prices are very helpful, but you should be careful not to over-rely on these. This is my point of departure for the next question. Why should you not rely heavily on secondary data and benchmarked prices? Why? Talk to me, ladies and gentlemen. Mai is asking, is the fixed cost one of the elements in marginal and absorption costing? Now, remember that fixed costs are overheads, okay? Fixed costs are overheads. So what happens when you absorb these? You absorb fixed costs into elements. So the marginal cost, when you do marginal costing, it means you do not consider a fixed cost. You only consider variable costs, the cost of raw materials. Okay, those costs that change as with the amount of volumes. Do you know why it is not important? It's not good. And secondary data actually means that you are looking at previous price paid. Now, a lot of buyers, sorry to say the word, but they are lazy. And why are they lazy? It's because they do not want to do their own cost analytics because they have never done CIPS like you people are doing. So you guys are clever. So I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about those other guys who've never done CIPS. So when you have never done CIPS and you are looking at cost analytics, the fallback plan with most buyers is what was the previous price paid? What was the previous price paid? And this is usually referred to as secondary data. Or you start benching prices, how you look at how the next organization, what are they paying, you know, these next organizations. You do not know what basis those organizations use to come up with the price that they're paying. So it is not right. You should not rely on it. You can look at it, that's fine. But my recommendation to you is build your own should cost model, okay? And you do it through cost analytics. Let's go to the next slide. Negotiating prices. Before I go there, let me go to the questions. I can't mute, it's fine. Then don't talk. Sorry, Maggie. Let's see. Okay, somebody wants me to go over marginal costing again and absorption costing. Let me go to the slide so that I can show you what we are talking about here. There we go. Firstly, let's look at this. So absorption cost absorbs indirect cost. Okay, so in all the indirect costs are absorbed into a specific job. Okay, the costs that are absorbed into direct costs are direct labor, direct materials, overheads, indirect costs relating to the manufacturing process. Under total absorption costs, all the overhead costs such as rentals, premises, head office are fully recovered by being incorporated into the cost of the products created. So what that means is that all these indirect costs are incorporated in one project, the product created. That is absorption costing. You absorb them all and they are placed in there. Marginal costing, on the other hand, is the cost of manufacturing an additional item after all your indirect costs have been absorbed. Then you only consider direct costs. In fact, you only consider the variable costs, those costs that change because of the raw materials that you brought in. This is a useful consideration for suppliers when pricing work. For example, should they pass on to the buyer the full absorbed cost per product, or do they only pass on marginal costs? Okay. Normally you can negotiate that the supplier passes to you only marginal costs, which means that they have absorbed the other costs, the overhead somewhere else. You are only charged for the variable costs that are used to manufacture your product. All right, and the difference can be very significant. All right, I hope you understand that. Let's go to the next one, negotiating prices. So it is assumed in commercial negotiation that price is a key variable. This is true where the purchased products are fairly commoditized. Bargaining over price alone, however, does not require the skills of a procurement practitioner. Experienced procurement professionals and managers, they recognize however situations, suppliers have merely padded out the bid or opening price with the negotiations, with their negotiation skills. Now, what I'm saying here, ladies and gentlemen, I left out a word there, but procurement practitioners will remember that most suppliers, they pad out, or in South Africa, we say you put fat on the price. And their opening price is always like that. So you don't just accept the first price, okay? And when you have a should cost, then it helps you to start from a good basis. An excessive focus on price other than commodity type markets can be counterproductive and can even lead to higher total cost. So you need to strike a balance. The concept of purchase price cost analysis I've already dealt with it, where you are required to do cost analytics in order to understand what the price the supplier is giving you is about. Okay, let's go to 2.2. We're going to look at economic factors. It's fairly short, ladies and gentlemen, so I won't spend much time on the economic factors. We'll just talk about the concepts of supply and demand and how they affect your negotiation approach. So the first point to note is, first, you need to understand what economics are. It's a study of how society uses its scarce resources. We always assume that all resources are not unlimited, they are scarce. It is a social science that deals with the production, distribution, and consumption of goods. And econometrics, on the other hand, is used to analyze economic data. Under economics, we're only going to deal with macroeconomics and microeconomics and macro. Of course, micro is about individual markets, and macroeconomics is about the entire economy. We've dealt with this before, and so it's a bit of a repetition. So microeconomics is the individual of businesses, the study of individual businesses, I beg your pardon. It's how small things behave, individual businesses, and so on. And microeconomics, micro considers the following: the factors that affect individual economic choices, and so on. When we look at scarcity, it's a key assumption in macroeconomics is that resources are all scarce. We don't have unlimited resources. Choices have to be made, and for every choice made, another choice is foregone. This is why the concept of cost of the opportunity or opportunity cost is comes in, where the cost of foregone opportunities because you chose something else. How supply and demand determine price? The law of supply states that if the price of a normal good or service is reduced, people buy more, and as the price increases, people buy less. The law of supply, okay, the law of supply states that the higher the price suppliers can obtain for goods and services, the more they will prepare to produce. So at high prices, less efficient suppliers can enter the market and still make a profit. So these are the concepts of economics, supply and demand. So supply is the amount that firms are willing and able. Remember the two words, willing and able to sell. Suppliers have to be willing and able. They might be willing, but if they're not able, they don't have supply. If they are able, but they're not willing, there's no supply. You find empty factories. If you go to industrial area, you find all equipment sitting idle because suppliers are able, but they're not willing because the pricing is not good. Yeah, equilibrium pricing is the meeting point of demand curve and the supply curve, where the two of them connect gives you the equilibrium price. All right. And that's the explanation of it. Market structure, which is also a component of the microeconomic, refers to competition in a particular market. You look at perfect competition, where you have many producers, where then you have monopolistic competition. And remember this, you make use of this market structure when you're doing the competitiveness analysis, okay? The Porter's analysis of the market. You check competitiveness of the market. So you've got pure competition, monopolistic or imperfect, which is also an imperfect competition. Monopolistic and oligopoly are imperfect, and then monopoly, only one producer with absolute power. There is no competition here in this particular market. And the rest of the slides are an explanation. Like we said, we are generously making these available to you. Let's go to macroeconomics. Macroeconomics refers to the study of the whole economic system. It embraces the general level of activities and growth in the economic system. So macroeconomics talk about inflation, interest rates, foreign exchange rates, labor costs and employment levels, and consumer spending. Why are we talking about this? Is because you as a procurement practitioner need to understand macroeconomics and microeconomics when you go, which the supplier is operating in, okay? Because depending on what are the challenges of a nation that they're going in, which is macroeconomics, the unemployment rate, the inflation, and so on, and the microeconomics, which are the competitiveness of that industry, you can structure your negotiation approach accordingly. And you know that you'll be able to get a better deal for your organization. Three important considerations for negotiation. Number one, changes and rates of exchange of changes. You need to consider that. A general versus particular effects. These are factors that have an effect on the economy, may not necessarily affect the supplier. Keep that in mind. Expectations, supplier sentiments, expectations of what might happen to factors that have an effect on the economy. Okay, some people's opinion might influence the economy. All right. The other considerations are economic growth, inflation, and this is, somebody asked about CPI +1. Now, this is a very important question that they asked. When it is applied to the whole country, it is called consumer price index. Now, this is the rate of price increases measured in percentage per year. And if it's applied to the whole country, it's called CPI. Now, when you are negotiating prices with a supplier, the general rule is that you give them CPI minus something. Why should you minus the CPI? Why is it recommended that in general, when you negotiate, you aim for CPI less something? Why is it so? Are you being mean, or is there a reason why you should let that happen? It's time for you to talk, ladies and gentlemen. Give me your personal experiences. When you accept supply increases, what do you accept? CPI? Anybody? Who asked me that question? Average CPI for the year. Yes, that's good. Very good, Morgan. Average CPI. I like that. But what I want you to engage me. Go ahead, Margaret. Why wouldn't you not accept CPI less something? And I want to tell you, Margaret, go ahead first, then I'll comment.
I think that one, it will be determined by GDP.
Explain that, please. Why would you want the price increase to be determined by the GDP of a nation? I don't understand. Anyway, let me help you, Madi. In general, it's CPI. Okay, so in general, it's CPI. So Morgan is right. Average CPI for the year. However, here's my challenge to you. When you've been managing a supplier over the years, one of the key performance indicators that you put in their contract with the supplier is continuous improvement. All right. They need to look at ways and means of improving the product, especially you guys who do technical buying and you do complex components. You need to look at alternative materials. You need to look at value engineering analysis. What changes can they implement? To such an extent that they come in with a CPI minus 1%. That is going to help you in your productivity and growing of the market, okay? So you need to understand that when you look at an average, like Morgan has rightly said, it's an average CPI. So it means that when you do average CPI, there are certain industries in the country whose price increase has not even gone to the average. There are some who are below average. Remember, an average is a summation of all the numbers divided by the number. So there are some that are low, others are high. So if you aim for CPI, it is likely that you are giving the supplier a higher price increase than what the market can afford. Okay, so I want to caution you that when you go into those types of things, you have to do the tremendous value analysis in order for you to arrive at a price that you will allow, okay? Do not use the gross domestic product, because GDP is just the value of the total amount of goods and services a country is producing, and the incremental value. So when you increase the value of that, the GDP goes up and so on. Yeah. Okay, let's carry on. Macro interest rates, you know what they are. Currency exchange rates. How do you protect your organization from currency fluctuation? Take forward cover. All right, it's as easy as that. Unemployment rate. So these are the detailed explanation of all the macroeconomic factors, and like I said, they are available in your study guides. Let's go to 2.3. And we are running behind time heavily, so we'll try and pick up speed. Okay, we are looking at the criteria that can be used in commercial negotiation. So this is now where the actual negotiation is beginning to take place. So we are beginning to prepare for the negotiation. You build a negotiation strategy. You must determine the negotiation objectives and boundaries. Determine your needs and wants. Remember variables, okay? Build a number of variables and put targets to them. They become objectives. Here is a framework, a strategic framework that you can use for your negotiation. You've got your overarching objectives, e.g. improving supplier performance in new contracts, the buyer's objectives, e.g. KPIs. On the right-hand side, what would be the supplier's objectives? And you can see here, when you do this thoroughly, ladies and gentlemen, on the left side, you put your objectives. On the right side, you anticipate what the supplier wants, okay? Some of these you would pick them up as you engage the supplier as you go on. And then you draw up this strategy framework. When you have this robust strategy, it helps you, okay, to ensure that the outcomes expected from the negotiation are clearly defined. The process to achieve desired outcomes is also clearly articulated. If you don't have a strategy, friends, you are setting yourselves up for failure, okay? In broad terms, negotiation plans and strategy involve 4 key activities: develop and prioritize your objectives and limits, seek to understand the other party's objectives. If you do not have a clear understanding of what the other party is anticipating to have, you might be going in a negotiation blind. Develop concession plans, planning the resources and logistics required and agreeing on the team goals. We've dealt with the positions and interests. I remember when we did the principled types of negotiations, we deal with the positions and interests. Suppliers have positions. They'll show them to you, but the interest is why they want what they want, okay? You have to ask and interrogate in order for you to get to the interest. Setting objectives and defining variables, we've talked about this. You need to ask yourself these questions. What do we want? How valuable is each of our wants? Why do we want what we want? Okay, then you start to identify your needs. What is our entry point and what is our exit point, which is the BATNA, the walk away. Somebody asked, what's the difference between the two? The walk away point is the point where you look at the BATNA. Define the variables. Okay, variables are the content issues. A wide range of issues may be focused on. We talked about pricing, quality requirements, delivery time, payment terms, And remember to identify your variables and use the must, intend, and like, the meal limits for each of them. Okay. Set your objectives. Now we go into details. Identify the overarching objectives and the organizational objectives. Develop specific objectives that will support the achievement of your overarching objectives. So regarding prices, KPIs, reporting lead times, and so on. I put in a nota bene here. The first stage in any negotiation preparation is to define your overall objectives, which may be related to a single variable, such as price. Number 2, establish these objectives. You determine the will, must, intend, and like. Identify the tradables issues. Identify those major negotiation issues, which is the bargaining mix, in achieving the desired position, and identify a plan for each issue separately. 4 and 5, where you determine the BATNA and possible options. Okay, you need to be able to understand and research thoroughly, okay? Understand current contracts, performance on them, understand the supplier's capabilities, by anticipating potential provider issues, effective counter proposals. Ask yourself, what if the other party says or does or acts like this? Question to create scenarios that will help you prepare for as many possible surprises and unexpected approaches as possible. The bargaining mix refers to the mix of variables that can be traded in a commercial negotiation. So put all these things together, make sure that all these things are ready for you to engage with the supplier. You can park all those controversial issues where there is no agreement once you get there, but put them as part of the bargaining mix. When you deal with price, we have spoken a lot about price per unit with discounts, rebates, payment terms, treatment of inflation, and so on. So different areas of price negotiation. You should even be able to see the escalation methods. You must calculate the price escalation formulas, especially if you have linked the price to commodities. Some important notes on concession planning. So good negotiators will never give anything away that has not already been planned as part of the bargaining mix in the concession planning stage. You need to plan. And when you say that you are giving up something, it should not look as though it is easy for you to give away, okay? So we know that a negotiation is a give and take. If you are not willing to give, you probably will not receive. So consideration of both parties leads to 4 types of concessions, okay? You can have, if an item is important to you, or it is important to the other party. If it's important to both of you, it becomes very difficult for you to concede on it. Look for those items that are important to the other party and not important to you. However, do not show that they are not important to you, so that when you give them, the guy is excited, he's got the best deal, but you should also use that, leverage that in order to get something out of the concession you have made. Basically, when you're planning how to concede, you must identify that will be made, concessions that will be made during negotiations. Concessions should be of low cost to you and high benefit to the other party. Consider building force walls. Now, this is where I said you make demands with the sole purpose of conceding on them during negotiations in return for a concession from the other party. Force walls is where you do that, and also a force wall is where you give away as though it is a very important thing to you, and the other party feels that they have gained something big out of you, and yet it's not an issue for you. Plan a supporting statement for each concession to make a case to the other party that it is a sacrifice for you and of real value to them. The other party should feel that each concession has been earned and has value. Something given for free has little perceived value regardless of its real value. So this is my point, ladies and gentlemen. You should make sure that every concession is seen to be free. No, it's not seen to be free, okay? Plan to make concessions in small increments, okay? Develop a spreadsheet and be sure that you do them slowly. Keep some towards the end so that you have something to give. Okay, let's look at the opening and presenting issues. What you say at the beginning of the meeting is very important in order to achieve, firstly, establish that both parties agree on the subject, confirm the agenda and attendance and timing, continue the conditioning process, attempt to anchor some key issues or concepts with the other party, get the issues on the table without necessarily revealing their importance. Okay, very, very important. How do you get these issues on the table? Begin by clearly and logically stating your opening position regarding the issue. Do not give away your position on the issue, but ensure you get them on the table. Allow the other party their opening. Now, when you are in class, when we do this, there are some role play that we do. You ask this person and so on. But for the sake of time, we can go through this at a very high level, okay, for you just to get a gist of it. Remember them, they're important for your exams. It is possible, but hopefully unlikely, that you establish that the distance between you is too great. For example, if they say they are not authorized to an issue. Now, if they say something like that, do not waste each other's time, okay? This should not happen, because they should have told you that they've got, you sent them the agenda, we'll be discussing this. But if they say that, then stop the negotiation. And like I said at the beginning, do not feel guilty, do not feel pressured to follow through a negotiation that you think is heading the wrong direction. Okay? So everybody that is around the table must have a relevant delegation. Let's go to the last one of chapter 2, which is assess the resources required. It's a very short one because it basically just talks about the facilities. Maybe before we go there, let me go to the questions and see how we can address some of them. Let me start from the bottom. Nokwanda is saying, when does conditioning of the supplier start? Is it during the negotiation or when the buyer is sourcing the market? Oh, when you're sourcing the market, Nokwanda, normally you won't know who you're going to be negotiating with, okay? If you can do some conditioning during that time, you are very clever, but normally it is when you have invited suppliers now to come to the negotiation. And you, in my experience, the first conditioning starts at the time when you welcome them to arrive at your premises for negotiation. You start conditioning them. They are very interesting aspects. Depending on the power play, guys, depending on the power play, there are certain things that you can do to condition those guys with those suppliers, where you allow the lead negotiator, if you know that you're dealing with a hard-nosed type of supplier, there are certain things that you can do to start conditioning them. Okay, you're not unkind. We'll talk about that just now, but you can, if you want to show how important you are, how much power you have a telephone conversation just before you come to the negotiation with a very important person, and then you come back in the meeting. As when you do the introduction, you apologize. You are the lead negotiator, Mkwanda, and you tell them, I do apologize because I was talking to the premier of Gauteng, or I was talking to the deputy president of the country because we were looking at this project that he is the custodian of. You can imagine what kind of conditioning already will be going through those people's minds as you introduce that type of a subject, okay? Now, remember that they will also do the same thing to you, and I'll show you just now how you can counter those kind of tactics when suppliers throw that kind of curveball or tactic at you to try and condition you to adopt you. Now, I've got these terminologies when people try to overwhelmingly think or make you think that you are not as important as you should. I call it adopting. They adopt you, you understand? So there's a way that you can deal with that. Let me look at Mashudu. Mashudu says, oh, where's my spectacles? Let me just put them back on. Yeah. Going back to costing, is there a correlation between absorption, marginal costing, and the negotiation approach? E.g., supplier may use absorption costing where the approach is a win-win. Yeah, remember, absorption costing is where they absorb all the overheads into a particular product. Now, what we are saying here is you can ask them to marginally cost your product because you want your product to come out as cheap as possible. Because when you give them additional business, unless you are the very first person to give them business, then you know that all their overheads will be on your product. They may do activity type of costing because they want to recover all the costs that are related in producing your product, okay? However, you find this existing business, it carries on and it goes on and on and on. They should not, unless they have hired a new set of management because of your job, then you can allow them to do the absorption costing on your product, and then that's fine. Okay, they put all the indirect costs into the direct cost, and it balloons, and you bear the cost of the total cost that the supplier is exposed to. But if they're already existing, you know that they've got a way of recovering their overheads. So the cost of their supervisors and managers and and all those guys is already given to them. Is already is already being recovered in other product lines. So you negotiate for marginal costing so that they can only charge you for the variable cost of the products and all just the items that are directly related, cost elements that are directly related to your products. Okay. Let me just see. Why is Cindy laughing? Okay. All right. No, that's fine. Let's carry on, guys. Identifying and assessing the resources required for, next, the facilities, ladies and gentlemen, remember again, our approach is the principled approach, and principled approach is based on the win-win. Okay, so when we do win-win, we are looking at a collaborative type of relationship. We are going to be friends beyond the negotiation. Once we leave the negotiation table, we will still be friends. So how do you do the facilities? You need to look at the comfort of everybody, okay? Housekeeping rules needs to be adhered to. Make sure that the toilet facilities are close by, breakaway rooms are close by. You provide them, your people, the guys with refreshments. If you can't provide them with food because of compliance issues, somebody thinks you might bribe them, at least the canteen where they can buy their own food should be close by, okay? The ideal environment is where both parties feel comfortable. Physically, temperature is all right, lighting and seating, okay? The room should not be sun-facing. Don't let them look in the sun, otherwise you damage their eyes. And like I said, we are aiming for this integrative type of negotiation, win-win. When you do distributive negotiation, where theoretically follow the opposite of the above, where you can make them feel uncomfortable and sit them on hard benches so that their sitting places there become sore, and then they can concede quickly. You understand? Theoretically that happens, but CIPS says that is unprofessional. You don't do that to other people, so it's not a CIPS way of negotiating. So it is important that we follow these, and we're talking about commercial negotiation. You guys are trained, so you need to know that including those small suppliers, treat them with respect, okay? Choice of venue, we've talked about this. It is, if the buyer invites a supplier to the premises, then they could consider to have the advantage in the negotiation. So yeah, you need to see that. The room layout, this is where I was talking about, it must not be sun-facing. Access to information must be available. The tone set by the venue needs to be important. It should be clean, tidy, comfortable, and quality of the room. The furniture must be okay. You and me have been sitting here for 3 hours, okay? Imagine negotiations. I've been in negotiations that have prolonged for 2 weeks, and you are sitting from 9 o'clock until sometimes 5 o'clock. So you need to make sure that people have got sufficiently comfortable. Okay, so you need to make sure about that. Involving your colleagues, team versus individuals. High-risk projects must always be negotiated in teams, okay? There may be many different aspects of the project which require different technical expertise, so you cannot negotiate them alone. All right. What are the team roles that you have? You need to have a chairperson who is a negotiation controller, okay? This is the person who controls the negotiation and ensures that everyone has his own or her own say. Then the lead speaker, normally it is a procurement. You guys are the lead speakers. You're not the subject matter experts. You've got the experts there. You give them a chance at the appropriate time and you ensure that you manage the teams well. You got an analyst and observers, and then you've got a secretary, a note taker who records. If you're recording the minutes of the negotiation electronically through a recording device, you must warn the people, okay? In most countries of Africa and the rest of the world, evidence that is collected without a person knowing cannot be used against them. That is why if you get arrested, the police will tell you that you have the right to remain silent. You are under arrest, so you have the right to remain silent, because whatever you say can or may be used against you in a court of law. And they further say you have a right to an attorney. All right. So when you are recording people, the only time when you record somebody unknowingly and it can stand is when they are doing criminal activities. Okay. So when somebody is doing some criminal activity and you start recording them without their knowledge, it can be used against them in a court of law because they are doing criminal activities. But when you are when in civil litigation, when there is people that are trying to talk about a situation and then you record them, you have to warn them. Okay, let's carry on. Individual negotiation styles, preferred negotiation styles are summarized by the 4, which are warm, where a person is a people person. Sorry about that. You want to cough in your ears. But you need to understand then the setup of your team. Understand what kind of people they are. You've got team members who are warm, others are tough, logical, and others are dealers. So if an individual, one of these negotiation styles will be dominant in most circumstances. So it is the responsibility of the lead negotiator to ensure that you have a good cross-functional team that is able to deal with those types of individuals. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to brush through chapter 3, and I do apologize that we may not finish because we've got 15 minutes to go, but that's fine. The slides will be available to you. Okay. Let's identify the stages of the negotiation to start with. So the negotiation stages start with the opening phase, okay? It starts with the opening phase. I've got them written down here. The opening stage of the negotiation covers the very first few minutes when the parties meet and greet each other and are seated. And this is where the conditioning, somebody asked about conditioning. This, in my experience, is where conditioning begins. Now, it is very critical for you that the people make impressions about you in the first 60 seconds, 60, 37 seconds, and even 1 second. Psychologists have shown that people form personal opinions that are sometimes difficult to change later on. Okay. Now, how do you ensure that you form the best, you give yourself the best impression to the other person? First impressions are important. So be on time, number 1. Do not be late, as a belief. Get the names of the other people right. Okay. This is how I do it. When I get into negotiations, normally we arrive and we get into the boardroom or the meeting room, and we exchange cards, okay? Be sure that you have cards. It's important, ladies and gentlemen, that you have business cards, okay? So you have business cards, and collect all the business cards and put them in order. When you collect those business cards, arrange them in the table in the manner in which the people are sitting. If you missed any one of them up and they are doing a proper introduction, make sure that you move that card so that you can address people by their names. Ladies and gentlemen, you will never understand the effect of addressing somebody by their name. It is very important. Shaking of the hand, have a firm grip. Don't squeeze their hands, but shake it in a grip that is neither too firm nor too floppy. Maintain eye contact. It's very important. By the end of this stage, you should check that you have got all the issues that you want on the table. The testing phase comes in. Yeah, this is where the information gained at this stage may help you decide which negotiation option to go for or to change your approach. Are you going for win-win or you're going to win-lose? This is testing stage. Listen attentively. Use open questions. We'll talk about the types of questions. If we don't, I'll give them to you so that you can revise them yourself. But use open questions at this stage to obtain missing information, identifying common grounds, clarify both parties' perceptions, to avoid misunderstandings, show concern for other parties' needs and interests. Develop new options in your head or on paper. Write. When you are in negotiations, have something to write, somewhere to write. When people talk, take notes for yourself. Those are going to help you a lot. In the proposal phase, this is both sides will be seeking to establish if the zone of potential agreement exists. It is during this phase. Either side may start making tentative proposals. In the case of a negotiation where the other party has already submitted a tender or proposal, this stage may provide an opportunity for them to make proposals to improve on the initial offer. These could be general suggestions. Then you will come to the bargaining. This is the meat of it. Both parties now, this is we start trading concessions. Proposals move from being tentative and general to being defined, definite and specific, and so on. And then you reach the agreement and closure. Remember, not all negotiations will get to this phase. Do not force yourself to get to a closure where you know you cannot agree, okay? Remember that, ladies and gentlemen. So this is the phase when it is either clear about explicit language or strongly suggests through non-verbal signals that the other party is ready to move to agreement, okay? So there are some ideas that I put here for you to read through. I put some do's and don'ts. Now your study guide has got a lot of do's and don'ts, but those you can read for yourself. I thought that during agreement, this is very important that you understand this. Always offer to prepare the agreement document, okay? And do it immediately, ASAP, after the negotiation. Get the terms. Now, this is what I physically do when I'm leading negotiations. My scribe, my minute taker, as we are talking about points, they are writing and they are binning. Sometimes I would have two projectors. If there is somebody presenting here, I would have another projector binning the minutes. So all the important points are put on there and they're agreed upon as we go along. So that, if you do that, it will save you time. Make sure that as soon as those minutes are agreed, you transfer them. Some of them will be part of your contract document. You update it and you don't waste time, okay? Don't be tempted to slip in a few extra items when documenting the agreement. Let me just see, do I have company? Don't use ambiguous language in describing who does what. Do not allow too much time to lapse between the end of the negotiation and the delivery of the agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do that, firstly, you might delay in executing, or you might forget what really happened and what needs to go into the agreement, okay? How do you appraise the key methods that can influence the achievement of desired objectives? The use of methods, push and pull. One, firstly, is persuasion and influences, definition of the two. But when you persuade, you are encouraging someone to do something that you want them to do, okay? Persuasion can be considered as a push. Influencing, on the other hand, is the ability to affect the manner of thinking of another. Now, let me just go through it very quickly. Let me see what I wanted to talk to you about: tactics, and communications. What I've done is that I did some extra research, as we always do, and put them in the slides. Remember, your course manual is a study guide, and the responsibility is on you to study through and follow through additional information. So what we try and do is do extra research and put it in these slides so that they can help you, to understand the materials better. Somebody did ask the reason for, what was that question? What is the reason for, no, it will come to me just now. But I wanted to tell you about some non-verbal communication. Okay, today we've got the world of online discussions, but it's very important for you to understand the body language. When you're negotiating with people and you are doing it virtually, insist that you are video conferencing where you can see their faces and they can see yours. Because there was a guy who did this research and they found that your body language and facial expressions account for 55% of what you communicate, okay? And then the tone of voice, how you say the words, accounts for 38, and only 7% the words that you use. If you scream at somebody, "I love you," how would they now? I don't want to scream in your ears, because I appreciate that some of you have got headphones on, so I don't want to burst your eardrums. The message "I love you" is only going to account for 7%, but the way that you use your body and the way that you use your tone, you are actually saying "I hate you," and that's what the other person will hear, in spite of using the words "I love you." So it's important for us to understand non-verbal communication when we are negotiating. What else did I want to conclude on? Yes, it was on emotional intelligence. What is the use of emotional intelligence in negotiation? It is because we are aiming for a yes. We are aiming for mutual benefit, for a win. So you need to understand, first, know your own feelings, because emotional intelligence deals with these two parts: intrapersonal intelligence and interpersonal intelligence. So intrapersonal is knowing one's inner world, your ability to form an accurate self-concept and to be able to use that model to operate effectively in life. When you know that you are reaching tipping point, people who don't have emotional intelligence, they don't know that they are overdrunk and they must stop. They keep on drinking until they drink themselves in a pulp because they do not have emotional intelligence. Or they become angry, or they continue listening to somebody who's making them angry, and they become so angry that they do some silly things, and the next thing they find themselves arrested and hurting somebody, and they're in jail. When you are emotionally intelligent and you know that your temper is short, when somebody is talking things that are getting you upset, you leave, you get up and go. You don't want to listen, because the more you entertain that, ladies and gentlemen, is very important. When you are in negotiations and you are conscious of, you are emotionally intelligent, you will use that emotional intelligence to either stop yourself or to know when the other party, so interpersonal knows, understanding other people, when other people's emotions are coming up, you know how to calm those situations down. Emotional intelligence is an essential part. I think that's what I wanted to say, because somebody wanted me to respond to that question. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and I want to look at the, let me look at the chart. Term ratification. What are you talking about here, Margaret? I don't know what you're talking about, term ratification. Let me go to the questions. Charles, how will the slides be shared with us? Morgan, I think CIPS, I'll send them to CIPS and they'll share them with you. Is this a cross-functional team? What are you talking about? Ms. Sinel, I'm not sure what you're talking about here. Please clarify. We still have 3 minutes, so if you can unmute yourself and just.
Hi.
Sinel, yes.
Yes. No, the answer was, I mean, the question was answered when you were talking about teams and individuals.
Oh, I see. Okay.
In negotiations. Thank you.
All right, Sine. Okay, so, and then Nokwanda, I was hoping that we can go through few calculations that that we can be asked in the exam, e.g. break-even analysis and elasticity. Oh, sorry, Nokwanda. I think you need to understand the principles. My aim here was to take you through the principles. My aim was to take you through principles so that they can help you. And then you are able to do the calculations yourselves. 3 hours, yeah. I think it's good enough for revision, and that's what we do for revision. But when we're doing detailed classes, we go into much, much more detail to elaborate some of these points. But that's good enough, ladies and gentlemen. We're looking forward to seeing you on the other side of your MCIPS, okay? So all the best. If I don't see you again, I will see you next year. I hope that Sari is going to arrange another one. If you guys are happy, don't forget to do the polls. Do we have a poll button here? Let me just make sure that we do. Do we have a poll button? I don't see it. Can you guys see the poll button? I need you to do the poll before you exit. Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sari. Thanks, Morgan. I'm glad you liked it.